So we're out here enjoying ourselves on the Idaho Backcountry Discovery Route. We're currently riding the low motorway toward Montana, and I got a flat. Look at that, got a nail right there. So let's get to the process of taking the wheel off and replacing the tube. So first thing we got is all of our tools right here. We've got a tool to remove the wheel right here. And we've got some tire irons. I've also got a whole section of tools here specifically for changing out the tire. So the first thing is we've got a cycle pump. And this is the pump part. I plug that straight into the KLR. We've got a gauge. And then I've got all my tools specific for replacing the tire. So you'll see this Bead Buddy 2 is going to come in handy. I've got a little handy little unit here to pull the valve stem through the wheel. I've got a stem changing tool. But one of the most important things is right here. Lots of lubrication for the tire, because these Dunlop Trailmax missions are a huge pain to get on if you don't got enough lubrication. So we've got a tarp here. It's going to make the job a little easier. Take the wheel off and everything. But let's cover all the tools that we talked about. Of course, we talked about the lube. Talked about at least two tire irons. I've got a couple here that I don't necessarily use as much. I definitely prefer the ones with the big spoons on them like this. Not necessary either, but it does make putting the valve stem easier to pull through the rim. So I got a tool for that. This makes getting the tire on, especially stiff sidewalls. Bead Buddy 2 from Motion Pro. Valve stem removal tool, gauge, and the cycle pump, and it's already configured, plugs right into our KLR via the battery tender. So the first thing we'll do is pull this little pin. Normally it comes with a cotter pin, but we've stopped using cotter pins. We just use this removable one. And then the castle nut, just loosen it here with this wrench. Which also acts as a spoon. So it's got two functions, 27mm on this side, and a spoon to help put the tire back on and get it off. So you'll have the castle nut on this side. You'll have a little washer. And you'll push this hub all the way through. So support it with your foot, and then you'll pull the bolt all the way through. There you go. Usually it'll come out with the little marker. So when you pull the hub with the bolt, the hub that supports the rear wheel, you're going to have these indicators on here, the tension adjuster indicators. So that's the order, and then you'll have this, and you're also going to have a couple spacers. So let's take the wheel off, and I'll show you the spacers next. So you should be able to push the front wheel all the way forward, and that should be enough to clear the chain. And now the tricky part is, I guess it came right off. That's good. Normally these brake calipers are the hard things to get misaligned, so take those out of the way. There you go. Put the calipers back, and then the spacers are the two we're seeing here. So on the brake side, you have a spacer that looks like this. That's going to fit over here. And on the chain side, you have a spacer that looks like this. So let's make sure those are in the right spot so we don't forget. Put the spacer in here, actually this side here. We'll clean everything up before obviously we put it back together. But this is just so we don't lose position of everything. And of course the pin. So that's how it should all fit. So back to the wheel. This is the cush drive. So we'll make sure the bearings and everything our seals are cleaned up on those. We'll take the cush drive out, set it over here, along with the rotor. Actually, the cush drive can stay in there. It's in there pretty good. We'll keep that in there. Now we'll get to the task of taking this tire off. So we'll take off the valve cap cover. In our case, we have ones that indicate the pressure. As you can see, it's solid red because there's no pressure anymore. And then we'll get the valve removable tool, put that in there and take the valve out. Careful not to drop it, put it in the dirt. Sometimes it'll pop out, but there's no pressure in my tire right now, so. There you go. It should fit in just like this. This is how the tool works. See where it clamps in there. And then the stem will typically have this little lock nut on it. Take that out as well. So on this particular tire, one of the hardest things is to break the bead, but as you can see, we lucked out. The bead is already broken because I've been driving on it or riding on it with flat tire. So the bead already came off. If the bead doesn't break, another thing we've used is, I can show you the technique. All right, so in this case, you can use the side stand, and you gotta, usually helps to have another person, but you can use that to help break the bead just like this. But in our case, the bead's already broken, but that's another option. All right, so it helps to have a tarp or something so you can keep it off the dirt. In our case, it's a little muddy, so I'm just gonna clean it up with a couple wet wipes. Hopefully make the job a little cleaner. And I'm doing both sides. The reason I'm doing this is because this particular tire needs a lot of lubrication in order to seat it once I'm done. And this dirt is going to get in the way of all that lube, so cleaning up a little bit. So using these two big spoons, I'm just going to pry this thing out, grab it from this side, and get it out. Take it in smaller bites if you can. There we go. Sometimes they get jammed in there. I'm not too worried about my rim. They make rim protectors if you're worried about the paint job on your rim, but I'm not too worried about that. Okay. We got a good start to it. Goes, and once you get almost to a third, you're pretty much there. It'll come right out easy. Start not having to fly off on big sections. You can go much larger. All right. There's the first side's out. Okay, now that'll give you access to the tube, but let's find out where exactly the tube is damaged. So it's right here. We'll look for the tube, get the area where the valve stem is, and we'll pull it out. Now be careful here. Make sure you kind of pull it out so you know when you fill it back up, because sometimes you might not know the location of the leak. When you fill back up the tube and you determine the location of the leak, you want it to coincide with where it is on the actual tire. So in our case, be very systematic about pulling this out and making sure you don't flip it and lose sight of where the leak is in relation to the tire. All right, so that's where the valve stem was. I can already feel the damage. It's right there. Actually, look at that. There's multiple ones. So I'm sure I rode with it flat for a while, unfortunately. And it coincides exactly to that nail there. So let's pull this nail out. So using a pair of pliers, we're gonna see if we can get this thing out. First of all, I'm gonna see if I can feel it. Holy cow. I could feel this thing. It's like this long inside there. So I'll try pushing it out. Give me enough leverage so I can yank on it. Dang, this thing's all twisted up in there though. Ready? This thing's in there good. Okay. I feel it now. It should come out now. There you go. That's the culprit. Stupid nail on the trail. I'm just gonna feel inside and make sure there's no other, look on the outside and make sure there's no other damage or anything poking through. And so far it feels good. So last thing we want to do is have multiple nails. All right, that looks good. So your new tube will come like this. It's got a valve stem cover, cap, probably 2 of these lock nuts. So we'll remove the top one and then we'll pull the valve stem out again using our tool. Okay, put that to the side. All right, so this tool will make getting the stem through the wheel a little easier. So it comes with this little thing that screws right into her. You notice also you got your own stem removal tool right there. So it'll just screw into the stem here, but we got to make sure that it goes actually through the hole first. So we'll guide this thing through the hole and then adjust the stem and get it set up. So you can see I've got it through the hole now. Now I'll attach it here to the stem. And that will help pull this through. Trick is getting it lined up so it comes right through this hole. There you go. It's close. Just got to get this whole tube down so it fits through there. This can be a huge pain. It's one of the hardest things, specifically for these rims, which are so deep. It could be really hard, so this tool helps me a lot. It's still not easy. So you can see the valve has come through the hole, but we're not going to pull it quite yet. We're going to wait, but I'm going to keep this here for right now. But we're going to make sure the tube is inside the whole tire now. So make sure it's all the way in, seated really well, and not rubbing against the wheel. Because that is the part that's going to keep us from pinching it when we put the tire back on. So clear it all the way around. Make sure it's plenty of clearance. You find out once the tube is fully seated around the edge, it makes that job a little easier. So now you can pull this through. And I'm just going to leave that there, make sure it stays centered. Because you want to keep that tube centered the whole time. Actually, I'll take it off and I'll put the nut on it now. Thread this nut. There you go. All right. That's one of the hardest parts, actually. It's getting a stupid stem through the wheel. So we're running out of daylight. The sun is almost setting, typical when you have these kind of flats. But we'll do our best to seat this before the sun goes down. maybe we'll say putting the wheel on tomorrow. Proper lube though, is very, very important for these tires. These tires have such a thick sidewall that it's going to be extremely difficult to get them on. So I'm going to put this lubrication on this side, making sure it's really well lubricated, because this part has to slide around the edge. Without lubrication, it's going to be extremely hard to get this thing on the rim. So I'm doing the entire perimeter of this side. It's going to be a little messy, but you want plenty. That is nice and juicy. Yeah, see, I can feel my fingers rolling smooth all the way through there. So, all right, that's one side. Let's do the other. Let me make sure the tube's all the way in. And it is. Okay, ready? This side's easier because it just goes on the outside here. Along the edges and down here. This part needs to go. Be generous with this stuff. That's why we carry a whole bottle or a whole jar of it. All right, lubed up. So using our 2 tire irons with the big spoons, we'll start on this side. Drive it down, hold it. Okay, now that we got those on there, I'm gonna hold the spoon here. Okay, now that we got to that point, I'm gonna use this thing called the bead buddy. The bead buddy is just going to fit in like right in here on this groove, and I'm going to latch it to one of these spokes. So let me do one more and then I'll get it on there. Okay, see where that fits. Now I'm going to put the bead buddy on here, attach it to one of the spokes, and that's just going to sit right in there, and that's going to keep me. It's going to keep this whole thing from walking backwards. And then I'm going to start over here. Okay, that looks good. Now think about small bites. And this one actually might walk back to the bead, so I probably should have started over here, but lesson learned. Plenty of lubrication though. This thing's going really easily. Without lubrication, you run, seriously could damage the sidewalls on these things. Small bites. Small bites. Come on. There you go. Just a little work. Starting to get hard. Uh-oh. But I think we're close. There we are. Maybe one more. We'll see. Hold that. Come on. Oh, so close. There you go. And voila. Done. Believe me, on these particular tires, same with the Idaho K60 Scouts, you are going to have an incredibly hard time it's not lubricated. So once it's in, take the bead buddy out and make sure this is all the way through and centered, which it is. Put the valve stem back in. Okay, we'll remove this. And then we'll take this out. This whole little assembly sometimes comes off, but screws back in there. And then we'll put the stem back in. And let's fill this thing up. So we'll use our trusty cycle pump. We've had this thing for 8 years. It's been good to us. So we've already configured it so that it plugs right into the KLR. So let's plug it in and start the KLR and fill this tube up. So fortunately, the 3rd gen KLR comes ready to power the pump. Sweet, right? Make sure it's in neutral. Let's start it up. So I'm just going to put about 10 or 15 pounds in it. It looks like it was enough actually to seal this side. Looks like the bead's sealed on that side. It's sealed over here. Not quite. It's not sealed on this side yet. But I was just going to pressurize it and then drain it and basically make sure that the whole tube isn't pinched inside there. So just fill it up to about 10 or 15 pounds. Looks like it's holding air. Get it back to 0. Put the stem back in it, and now we're going to fill it back up to proper pressure. In our case, 36 pounds. So once it gets up to about 15 or 20 pounds, you're probably going to see that this is going to seat. So make sure you keep your fingers away from that. I already heard the other side seat. So normally you hear pop, pop, 2 pops, but we already heard 1. Looks like it's getting close. There it is. Pop! Look at that. Looks like it's all seated. Okay, let's check it. Looks like it's about 30 pounds. Let's get it up to 36 pounds and then I think we'll call it a night. It's getting dark and I'm not really into putting this on in the dark, so we'll just wait till morning. Alright, I think it's full enough. Let's check it. There it is. Looks like we got 33 pounds, so that's good enough for right now. It's getting dark, and I do not want to be putting this tire on after dark, so we're going to wait until tomorrow. Here we are, a brand new day, well rested, ready to put the tire back on. So last night, looks like our tire was able to hold pressure all night. That's a good sign. Let's check it one more time. So first thing you'll notice is that we got kind of a lot of dirt in this little bearing area, so I'm gonna do my best to clean this up before we put everything back together. I also might pull this cush drive out, and they're pretty good. But make sure there's nothing in, no dirt in theirs either. Let's see, there's some little critter. So clean that up really nicely. Make sure that's in there really solid. Push those all the way in. And we'll clean up this portion of the sprocket. Especially these down here, you know. I might add a little bit more grease to this as well. So fortunately, carry some grease. So I'll add that to that middle section as well, because it got kind of dirty. He's pushing this little spacer out. So we'll put some new grease in there. We'll put this thing back together. Just a little bit of grease around this section here. Also, just a little bit more inside here. Not too much. There you go. Put that thing back in there. Okay. That's back in. Grease, oop, not too much. Little grease right here. Okay, that looks nice. Let's set that back in here. Make sure that fits in there really smoothly. Probably bounces around a little bit. That's kind of normal. Good right there. So now we'll go back to the shaft. Remember all the location of the parts. Pin, washer, adjuster. Now we're going with these. So let's clean these up. These spacers. This is the spacer for the brake side. Up and then re-greased. So apply some grease to that. Okay, that's gonna fit in on this side. Let's clean that up as well. Mess, huh? Put a little bit of grease in this section. Put the spacer back in. Okay, that's that side. Same thing, just a little grease on this. Fit right in here. Okay, we got our spacers in place. Now the next thing to do is the shaft. Let's clean that up. Put a little bit of grease on this. I think we're done with the grease. Probably more than we need. Okay, I'll set this on there, and then we'll have everything set up. Also a good idea to clean this. What's up, Bumblebee? Seem to be interested in this stuff. And then we'll put that right on this section here so we don't forget. And we're ready to go. So let's go to the tire now. Alright, sometimes it can get a pain to get the brake rotors into these pad area, so I tend to just using a little tire iron. I stick it between there. Maybe this will be here. I stick it between there. Just elongate these a little bit more. Push the piston down. Makes it easier to get the rotors in there. There we go. Make sure that's aligned. I'll try to get this wheel lined up. This is the hard part, one of the hard parts, because these spacers tend to get knocked out. Getting it lined up just right could be a pain. Getting these brake pads to line up on the rotor can also be a pain in the neck. Typically I remove it until it clears, and then I'll push it in, making sure that everything's aligned. See what I'm saying? Those tend to get popped out. That one got popped out. So of course it's dirty now. So we'll clean that up again and put it back in. This is probably one of the hardest parts, is to get all these things lined up. I gotta remind myself not to get frustrated. It's part of the process. Okay. Try to get that right here. Okay. That looks pretty good. Everything's aligned, thankfully. Whew. All right. Now let's get the chain on. Push it all the way forward. That should get the chain on. And then bring it back, and then we'll lift it up with our toe. And hopefully everything will be set up and aligned, that we can get this first, at least this first section in. All right, see if everything's aligned. There we go. At least I got the first part in. Then we can work on the alignment of the other side. Whew. At least that part's in. Come on. There. Ay, ay, ay. So we ended up taking the chain off to make things a little easier. We'll put the chain on now. So as much as we tried to keep the chain on to get the alignment and everything and get the hub through there, we couldn't. So we took the chain off, but now we're going to have to adjust the chain tension. So these nuts, I think, are both typically 14s, except we've changed ours out. This is a nylock to prevent it from coming off. So ours is at 13. So we'll loosen that. Now loosen this one. And that should give us enough room when we push forward to get the chain on. Let's hope. It has to go, make sure it goes underneath that chain guard. Alright, there it goes. Now we'll tighten it back up where it was before. Then we'll check the tension. So when we put the hub through, apparently this little thing got swapped on us, so push it out a little bit and just swap it around. And then you'll be able to push it back in. And that's what we're using to check the tension of the chain. So we've set this one to about 3.5 on these little notches. That's about what it is on the other side. We'll check the tension. That seems pretty tight, actually. Might want to loosen that a bit. So we'll loosen it. That one looks like it's just about at 4. And then roll it one more tight. So it's just at 4. Check the tension. That is too loose. So tighten it just a hair. Somewhere between the two. Let's see. That looks pretty good, I think. Just one more tighten. And there we go. Now we'll match it up on the other side. Call it good. That's close.
That's good, that's good.
That's good right there. So they both match. And now we'll snug this down after we put everything back together on the tire. So you're gonna want your indicator. Make sure your indicator gets on this side. Then we got your washer. And then we got your castle nut. And then we'll tighten that down. And we'll push everything, push the wheel forward with our knee while tightening everything down. Then put a lot of torque on this thing and then line up one of these holes. So we can put the, there it is, that's good. And then run the pin through there. Bada bing. And make sure the rotation's good. Feels pretty good. We'll check the chain tension once again. So we actually have a chain tensioner gauge that lets us know where the chain tension needs to be, but we're pretty good at determining that if this barely touches on here, then that chain tension is pretty good. So it's good for the trail. That looks good. So remember, we widened the rear brake pads. So let's make sure we pump the rear brakes. There you go. Those are back now, tight onto the rotor. Okay, and the last thing you want to do is snug up these adjustment nuts. So just make sure they're tight. And then follow it up with the top locking nut. Make sure they're all snug. And do the same to both sides. So a nail kind of not ruined our trail ride, but it definitely took an hour and a half to take the tire off and put everything back together. So it's now only 9 in the morning, so let's hit the trail. So if you're interested in more KLR modifications, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of future updates.